It's 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning, so you know what that means. That means it's time for your menopause morning chat. And today we're talking about a very, very important subject with menopause. And it's basically looking at the connection between your brain and cognitive health and menopause. Now, this is a very personal subject for me as well, because menopause, well, not even as much specific about menopause, but with brain and cognitive health, because it's just a very significant issue with my family. There's been a lot of neurodegenerative disease in my family. My grandmother died with severe dementia. I remember being very young, and grandma moved into the house with us, but I was too young to try to explain dementia to. But I remember one morning, like 2, 3 in the morning, waking up and I hear rustling in the hall, and I go into the hallway, and there's grandma standing there, honestly, completely naked, had no idea where she was, had no idea who I was. And I later in life found out that grandma passed with severe dementia. And then my mother actually was diagnosed with dementia. And my mom spent the last 13 months of her life living in a hospital bed with my father, feeding her baby food and changing her diapers. And she died with dementia. And my older brother, he ended up getting diagnosed with ALS. And he lived maybe about 2 years after that diagnosis before he also died with a neurodegenerative disorder. So I'll be very candid with this. I very selfishly research brain health, and I have a whole protocol that I use that's tied into not just supporting my brain, but also really with what's going on from a hormonal perspective, the whole gut brain immune connection, and every aspect that I need to do to keep this happy and healthy. And that's what I'm going to help you with today, because you've probably been told if you have menopause, menopause is the reason why you have brain and cognitive decline. And there's some truth to that, but that's not really the depth of it. Because you're often told that when you have low estrogen due to going through menopause, which if you've listened to my other videos and the other menopause morning chats, you'll recognize is that just because you go through menopause does not mean you have low estrogen. Remember, 15% of the women who enter menopause every year, and that's 15% of 2 million women, don't have problems with low estrogen because they're still utilizing the whole system, how the brain, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals all work collectively to keep you in perfect hormone balance. So who I'm really talking to is if you're part of the 85% where you do have menopause symptoms. And then the reality is if you have an expression of low estrogen going through menopause, yes, you are at a significant risk factor for brain and cognitive health. And it was a couple of years ago, I did a survey, and I did a paid survey that went out on social media, and I only sent this one single question to women who lived in the U.S. who were between 45 and 55, and that one question was, what is it that you fear most about aging? And it was kind of an interesting thing for me because I literally thought I was going to get a whole host of different responses. Anything from retiring too young or too soon, retiring too late, not having enough money in retirement, having, getting disconnected from my children, or maybe growing older and not really being involved with your husband or your significant other. I just thought there were going to be all these things, like graying hair or weight gain, like all these different things I thought were potentially what the answers were going to be. And I couldn't have been more wrong. The single biggest thing that was brought up, I just saw the word dementia, 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 dementia. It was really one of the biggest factors of what that survey told me that women are concerned about with aging. And man, I totally get it. Watching a grandmother, a mother, and a brother go through this, the last thing you want to do is get to the later years in your life that are supposed to be the golden years, and you don't even really recommend or recognize people in your life anymore. You can't remember the things you want to remember. And when you're told that this is low estrogen, now here's kind of the putting this all together. You're told that if you have low estrogen, this will create things like cognitive decline, which you probably most notably know as brain fog. You just don't remember like you used to. You can't comprehend like you used to. And like now you're walking into the room, you forget why you walk in there, you pick up your phone, you forget why you picked it up. It's any cascade of things that be going on. And, overall with that cognitive decline. As I said, there's a memory impairment. There's also very often when you have low estrogen, there's also decrease in serotonin and dopamine levels. You might, and that's going to definitely affect your moods. And from a serotonin perspective, you might know of serotonin to help you with sleep, but did you know serotonin is actually nicknamed your happy neurotransmitter? So for you to be happy, you have to have enough serotonin, and estrogen plays a role in, again, serotonin and dopamine, which are both two of the primary four amino neurotransmitters that you need really healthy in your body for everything else to work correctly. Also drop in estrogen affects sleep. It affects neurological vulnerability. So it really basically, the less estrogen you have, the more this is a problem, the more reduced of the gray matter between the two hemispheres of the brain. So you've got that right and left hemisphere, and the gray matter allows them to communicate with each other properly. And then also recognizing that there's a neuroprotection that your body has, due to your brain's ability to create a healthy inflammatory response and to release toxins every day, which plays a role also in a really good night's sleep. And really the biggest, the other things to look at this is, the common, like what's really going on in your brain. So there could be there could be many different issues, and it could be mostly hippocampus, which is the hippocampus part of your brain is really crucial for memory and learning. So if you're recognizing that cognitive decline where you don't remember like you used to, or you can't even comprehend or learn like you used to, that would be tied directly into the hippocampus or the prefrontal cortex. And this is really essential for high level thinking and planning and so on. So for your brain to reach that deep level of that thinking ability, and it's also your estrogen overall, it does impact your neurotransmitter system specifically. So it's, again, really involved in memory and attention, mood, motivation, focus, and these are the things that you are told is just because of low estrogen. I know that is true. But why? But that's not the answer, though, because what I want you to think about is, yes, if it's low estrogen, well, why is your estrogen low? And why is it that 15% of the 2 million women that enter into perimenopause and menopause every year do not have this decline? They do not have this brain and cognitive decline, and it's because their system is working. And when I talk about the system, let me pull this up even a little bit bigger for this picture for you. So when we're looking at this slide right here, you can see where estrogens are on this picture, and the estrogens are all the way at the bottom. So and really the way that not just conventional medicine, but even also most holistic practitioners, the way they treat menopause symptoms and the brain and cognitive decline of tied into what they think is menopause is they treat it by giving you estrogens. And hopefully, if they are giving you estrogens, they're giving you progesterone with that, which is important. But here's the kicker, though. This still doesn't fix the problem. It might help alleviate some of your symptoms because you're supporting the estrogen production, or, well, not even production at this point. You're just like giving an external estrogen. But it's not fixing the problem, because the problem is up in the top. Because this is a very a brief version of what's going on in your body from a hormonal perspective. And this is so essential to be working correctly when you go from the childbearing years into perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopausal. And if this system here is working correctly, you don't have symptoms of menopause. You don't have the brain and cognitive decline. You're at least impacted by what's going on with estrogens. And the key, though, is not just about getting estrogen. The key is you have to fix the system. So the system is basically how your brain, your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your adrenals all work collectively. And when that's in proper order, when you enter into perimenopause, your body still has the ability to maintain perfect hormone production for you. And with recognizing when you go from childbearing years to perimenopause, you don't need to produce the same amount of estrogen, because you no longer have the ability to to basically to conceive, and you're not going to have a monthly cycle. So the level of estrogens and progesterone you need at that point are much lower. And your adrenal glands are already designed, like if you believe in God or a higher power, God designed your body to go through this transition from childbearing years to perimenopause, menopause, most menopausal, as barely even a speed bump in the road. Because you're going to make that transition from the production of these hormones from your ovaries into the production of these hormones through your adrenal glands. Now the challenge though is that for most people and most women, by the time you enter perimenopause, you've probably spent the last 30 years before that being overwhelmed, overworked, and overstressed. So you enter perimenopause with this system not working well. So if the system isn't working well, so this is the very system that should maintain your perfect hormone balance, and it just doesn't have the function anymore. And really fixing the problem is really addressing deficiencies in vitamin B5. This is sometimes pantothenic acid or panthenine, and really supporting the production of pregnenolone, which is your mother hormone of every other hormone that you need for this system. And because everything else is just a conversion from pregnenolone. And if you look at that pathway going straight down into estrogens, again, it starts with B5. The B5 converts into a coenzyme called acetyl-CoA, and your body uses the combination as the two most really notable raw materials of that acetyl-CoA and cholesterol to produce that first mother hormone, the pregnenolone. And then everything is a conversion from there. Then pregnenolone converts into DHA, DHA converts into testosterone, testosterone converts into estrogens, and then you live that balanced hormonal life that you're looking for, recognizing that there's a pathway on the other side. It goes from pregnenolone to progesterone, cortisone, and cortisol. And it's all working collectively and together. And that's how you improve this, not just what's going on hormonally. This is how you make the biggest difference with your brain and cognitive function. Because when we think of this, when you're told it's just about low estrogen, what I want you to recognize, when this system that you're looking at right here is not functioning correctly, this plays a direct role in your neural connectivity. So it's basically tied directly into your quality of sleep and mood, your ability to memorize and learn, and your overall neuronal connectivity, which is how your brain and your nervous system communicates through your entire body. And even on a deeper level, when you get proper sleep, a lot of people don't know this, but your brain actually shrinks when you're sleeping. And think of a sponge. Like if you have a sponge and the sponge is full of water and it's just sitting there, and then you squeeze that sponge, well, what happens to the sponge? Or the contents of the sponge. Once you squeeze the sponge, that water comes out. Well, your brain will build up toxins through the day. And when you fall asleep, your brain shrinks a bit, which is like squeezing the sponge. And what it does is it squeezes the toxins out of your brain. But you need a healthy sleep cycle to achieve that. And as I mentioned, how this is all really impacting, like I said, the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, and is affecting you on so many different levels. So what I want you to understand is that if there's a concern with any kind of neurodegenerative risk factor for a neurodegenerative disease, anything like dementia or Alzheimer's or ALS or Parkinson's, and really the list goes on, you've got to get the system working well. It's not just about the estrogen, but we can actually create we can kind of almost piece together the puzzles to understand if your estrogens are low. Your estrogens are low because the system isn't working well. And this system has a direct impact on so many different levels of brain function that you would still be missing even if you give yourself estrogen. And I want to be clear, if you take estrogen, if you're on a combination of estrogen and progesterone, that will still provide you a bit of support from a brain and cognitive perspective, yet it still isn't fixing the problem. So even though you might feel a little bit of symptom relief and a little bit of improvement, you've got to recognize that there's still something deeper going on, and there's likely going to be a deeper level of decline in your brain and cognitive function. And then the other thing I want to bring up that's so important for you is to also recognize that, like, even when I'm looking at hormones with my clients, and I look at hormones much differently than most doctors, and even definitely different than most conventional doctors, or really probably all conventional doctors, and really even different than most holistic practitioners, because most are looking at hormones through blood, which is very incomplete. Blood doesn't really tell you the whole story of hormones, because blood only looks at the amount of specific hormones in your blood in that moment. It doesn't give you a recognition through the day, and it has no recognition of anything that's potentially built up in your tissue. Yeah, so really the only way that I'm going to look at hormones to help make a and provide an option for you to bring things into balance is I'm going to look at a 24-hour urine collection. And I'm not going to just look at one estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. I'm literally going to look at 32 different hormones to really understand deeply what is going on. Where are the imbalances in your hormonal system that you can start to help support naturally? And I also, excuse me, I also want you to understand is that your hormonal system is a response system. So what that means is that when something's wrong with your hormonal system, it's usually not a problem with your hormonal system. It's whatever is causing that response. So this could be tied into food sensitivities. It could be infections, most notably in the gut. It could be tied into toxicity. It could be tied into anything that's driving an inflammatory condition. It could be tied into, poor fundamentals of health. There's all these different things that would be the triggers for this. And again, into a brain and cognitive function. Like if you have a trigger of a gut infection, well, if you have a gut infection in your gut, let's recognize that 90% of your brain output goes right down the vagus nerve, through the spinal column, into the nervous system tissue in your gut, and it comes right back up. So whatever's going on in your gut is going on in your brain. So if you have a gut problem, you're going to have a brain problem. You can't separate those. And also understanding if you have food sensitivities that you're unaware of, and that's a high likelihood, because 86% of the people who have food sensitivities are asymptomatic. So it's not like you eat the food and you feel like crap right away. But you eat the food, it drives a level of inflammatory response in your gut, which then has a negative impact on your hormones and will then impact your brain and your immune system function as well. Or even a story about one of my clients whose mother had significant cognitive decline, wasn't remembering things anymore, very confused a lot. And she brought her mother into my office. And what was interesting about it is she initially went to one of the best neurological doctors here in Orange County. And from what she told me when she came into my office, they literally had a 5-minute conversation about her mother's symptoms. And the doctor, with no testing, no nothing, just said, "Oh, well, she's got Alzheimer's, and I'm going to write a script for this prescription, and let's just try to slow down as much as we can. But we can't get rid of it. We can't. There's nothing you can really do for Alzheimer's except for slow down the progression." And they walked out of the office literally in less than 10 minutes with no testing and a diagnosis of Alzheimer's and a prescription for a drug for Alzheimer's. And then she brought her mom into my office. She explained that whole thing, and I paid attention to what the body tells us. And it was easy to recognize that there was significant liver congestion, and liver congestion was probably tied into heavy metals, which are known neurotoxins. And sure enough, we did that test, and her mother was really very high in mercury, which is a known neurotoxin. It's poison to the brain. And what was so interesting about it, I just made a recommendation to help her body naturally support detoxification, and eventually recommending a supplement that actually helps the body to naturally pull the metals out of the brain. And guess what? Her cognitive function improved. Yeah, so I want you to really understand with this is that yes, it's so often all you hear is your brain and cognitive decline is low estrogen. Yeah, that's a part of it, but it's not the problem. The problem is that this system that I'm talking about right here isn't working properly. And deeper than that, there's things that are triggering that you're just not addressing. Yeah, so I wanted today to be that opportunity for you to recognize truly what's going on. And if you're already on estrogen and progesterone, that it's still you still have to fix the system. And sometimes women will ask me, and perhaps you're thinking this yourself right now, well, if I'm already on estrogen and progesterone, do I really need to do a test like you're discussing? And my very candid answer is it's even more important than that. Because if you're using an estrogen cream or an estrogen patch or pellets under your skin, you want to make sure you know where the estrogen is going. Yeah, because what I've seen too far often in my clinic is that women are using patches, creams, or pellets, and they're not the hormone is not getting into the blood, which is where it needs to go to actually make a difference in your body. But then the question you have to ask yourself, if the hormone is not making it into blood, where is it going? And the reality of that most of the time is if it's not making the blood, it's building up in your tissue. And then if it's building up in the tissue, you never see it on a blood result. So you can actually have what looks like low estrogen in your blood, yet an estrogen dominance in your tissue, which is then a risk factor for breast cancer, for other cancers, for other chronic ailments, of course. So the cool thing though is that this is all recognizable. You can do a 24-hour urine collection. You can see what's really going on. You can see the buildup of the estrogens. You can see where your system is failing you because of low progesterone or I'm sorry, low pregnenolone or low DHEA, or you could see that you're not getting the proper conversion, or you could see that maybe your liver isn't working well enough to really process your estrogens correctly. So there's so much that you can learn just by doing that simple test and really getting to the bottom of what's going on for you. So I want to share this because I feel like this is very important. And as I mentioned earlier, this is very personal to me because of a strong family history of neurodegeneration. If you missed the beginning, I had a grandmother that died with severe dementia. My mother died with severe dementia. My older brother died with ALS. And so I want you to really, so I get it. I've seen what neurodegenerative disease does to people. I've seen how it affects families. I've seen how it affects the individuals with it. And this is something that I want you to keep your brain happy and healthy for the rest of your life, just as I'm committed to. And I want you to recognize it's not only about menopause. It's much deeper than that. So now you've got some answers, and it's up to you what you do with it. You can, and actually, really quick, what I'd like you to just do for yourself is write down any symptoms that you have that you think are any kind of neurodegenerative decline, brain and cognitive decline. So if you feel like your memory isn't what it used to be, or you're not as quick on your feet with your thoughts anymore, or if it's harder to regulate your moods, if these are different things that are going on for you, I want you to write those down and maybe circle the one that really concerns you the most. And then the big question is what, and it's kind of like a what if, what if you do nothing? What if you just keep going along, or, and if you do nothing, or if you only depend on taking estrogen and you never fix the system and you never get to your triggers, unfortunately, it's still going to get worse, even if you're taking estrogen, because it's not only about estrogen. It's so much deeper than that. And then the other question is, well, what if you do something about this? What if you do look at your hormones on a very comprehensive level to understand really what's going on? And what if you do support your mother hormone? What if you support all this conversion? What if you get to the bottom of all the triggers for really your hormonal expression? Well, you know what? Then you get to turn back the clock and feel young again. You get to be, if you're part of the 85% that's symptomatic with menopause, you can then become a part of the 15%, where the only two symptoms you have is you no longer have a monthly cycle and can't conceive, and that's it. So thank you for whether you're watching this live or if you're watching this as a replay. If you have any questions, please, wherever you're watching this, put those questions below and I will address them personally. And then also, two different things below this video, I will put a link to the Menopause Morning list. And when you join the Menopause Morning list, you will get a free copy of my book. It's called Fat, Fatigued, and Frustrated, which is the underlying foundational factors of what you want to do in your lifestyle to help turn this around. Recognize that lifestyle enough doesn't do the whole job, but you have to have the lifestyle aspects to be really strong for yourself. And also below in this video, I will put a link to that test that I'm referring to. It's actually from a company called Meridian Labs. It's a plus hormone profile number 4080. This is where we're going to look at 32 different hormones. We're going to look at how your kidneys affect your hormones, how 2 different levels of your liver function affect your hormones. We're going to look at inflammation. We're going to look at chronic disease states tied into either inflammation or gut problems hindering your ability to utilize proteins in your body, and so much more. So I'll provide those both for you. And by joining the Menopause Morning list, what you do every week, either on Monday morning or I'm sorry, either Monday night or Tuesday morning, I send out an email letting you know what is the next subject and a reminder of the Menopause Morning coming up, because I really do encourage people to be on live, and I do this live so you can ask questions live and put in your comments. And so join that Menopause Morning list, get your book Fat, Fatigued, and Frustrated, and start your foundational aspects of your hormone balance. And with that said, everybody have a fantastic day. And I look forward to next Tuesday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, for your next Menopause Morning. Have a great day.